All right, so hey everybody, thanks for joining me for this talk. My name is Shaun Empie. I'm a solutions architect here on the NGINX team. I've been here about 2 years now, and it's been a great run so far. Company keeps growing, and popularity of NGINX keeps growing as well. And so a little bit about me, I've been working in the application delivery controller, fancy load balancer space for about 8 years now. So familiar with other, application delivery controllers, WAFs, and products in the space. So, happy to talk about, NGINX, NGINX Plus, and ModSecurity and how they can be used, to secure applications. And when it comes to, securing your applications, there's a lot of, layers in that security. When it comes to AAA, authentication, authorization, auditing, rate limiting, bandwidth limiting, network firewall, providing a secure environment, for that application. And so, with all those different features and functionality, a lot of those, built into NGINX or NGINX Plus, why do we need a web app firewall, and really what is a web app firewall? Let's see. There we go. So, you have your network. You have a network firewall, protecting that network and protecting the applications. But a lot of times, a request that is a malicious request or an attack is going to look like proper traffic to a network firewall. So, but we have next-gen network firewalls as well that are application firewalls or application aware, and I still like to break these into two separate groups. One, that the next gen network firewall being part of the network infrastructure and can dig into those application protocols, but is part of the infrastructure, whereas a web app firewall is going to protect against application level attacks, but it's going to do that as part of the application stack. Right, so you're going to, as you develop, test, and deploy that application, those web firewall rules and policies are going to be part of that stack. So you're really deploying this as part of the code of the application. So what a WAF does, as a layer 7 software, it inspects the HTTP packets and looks for malicious requests, malicious traffic, and you can, based on the rule, decide if you want to just alert, log, or actually block that traffic. And why do we need this again? It's really a last line of defense, right? If we're developing applications, deploying apps, we all want to develop perfect code, but there's always potential for security vulnerabilities in the tools you're using, in the code you're writing, or system libraries. So there's always potential for vulnerabilities. So this is like a seatbelt, right? In a car accident, we want to mitigate any kind of problems with these vulnerabilities that come up. And so when you'd want to use a WAF, specifically for compliance issues, right? So for PCI, HIPAA compliance, you might be required to use a web app firewall to secure that traffic. And lots of times a web app firewall can also be used as give your development team a buffer, so that if there are any vulnerabilities found, you can mitigate those right away at the WAF and give them time to actually fix the code or patch anything that needs to be upgraded. And so there's also a lot of different types of WAFs or where they can actually be deployed. So there are SaaS-based services. There's on-prem or self-hosted, and that's pretty much what we'll be focusing on today is self-hosted ModSecurity. And there's also hybrid or next-gen WAFs that will actually inspect the traffic, use machine learning or AI to kind of anticipate the proper behavior of that application, so that it knows when that deviates rather than looking for a known problem or known vulnerability. Okay. So delving a little bit more specifically into the ModSecurity WAF, and a little bit of an origin story, which is a little bit similar to NGINX. So written by a sole author in 2002, Ivan Ristic, and working full time in the project a few years later, and his company was acquired by Breach Security, and so over the course of a few years, that was also acquired by TrustWave, and TrustWave is the current maintainer of the ModSecurity project. And in 2012, they changed the licensing so that it was part of the Apache licensing, so that that really kicked off a lot of commercial products using ModSecurity within their product, and that also spawned the modules for IIS and NGINX. And so around 2012 timeframe, that's when ModSecurity was available across all these different platforms and as a way to secure the web applications. But if you've used ModSecurity in the past, with NGINX or other platforms, there are some issues around stability, performance, and complexity when you're deploying. So just to give you an idea of what that looked like in the past, you have if you're using NGINX, if you're using IIS, you have that software, you have the plugin or module associated with ModSecurity, and then because of the nature of how ModSecurity was built, you still need the Apache internals, because it's really an Apache module. And so you have all these different links in the stack to deliver that web app firewall. And so, as I mentioned, stability issues, versioning issues, and one of the big complaints I've heard from folks that have used ModSecurity in the past is a lot of false positives, right? Constantly having those signatures getting tripped, and so this project, which is ModSecurity 3.0, is really to address those shortcomings that we've had in the past. And so, there's no longer any dependency on the internals of Apache, which is big. And it was about 2015 that we partnered with TrustWave on this project, and they wanted to develop a library that was can be centrally used by just about any kind of connector or module with any product. And so NGINX, focused on developing that connector for NGINX. And so that was a big part of the project. Another big thing that was helpful in making this a lot simpler to deploy on NGINX is the dynamic module support. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. So in earlier last year, we actually deployed support for dynamic modules. So now you can actually build a third-party module. You can write your own, or something like ModSecurity, and compile that to work with NGINX or NGINX Plus without having to recompile NGINX itself. So it makes it a lot simpler to deploy those modules. And so, it's available as an open source module, but with NGINX Plus, as our commercial product, you get, technical support, to make sure that module is going to be, functional, and it goes through, our QA processes so that we have specific builds that are, known to be stable. And so now get a lot simpler architecture here with NGINX, the module, and then that module talking directly, to the ModSecurity library. And so, we've seen, performance improve significantly. It's a lot simpler to deploy and manage, and you don't get the false positives that you got with previous versions of ModSecurity. So previously with ModSecurity, you had these 5 phases or areas where you could, write rules to protect against attacks, right? So that would be, you have, request headers, request body, response headers, response body, and then logging. And so that's where you could write the rules to interact, with the process in those phases. With the latest version, ModSecurity 3.0, changes a little bit with a changed architecture of the module. So there's really 3 phases, within NGINX that you can write the rules to interact, with the request and response. So it's request headers, request body, response headers, and then to mitigate anything like data leakage from the response body, we actually use the subfilter module within NGINX. So we can still mitigate those types of issues. It's just not running through ModSecurity. And so the more information about the phases within NGINX can be found on nginx.org and the development guide. It goes over in detail the HTTP phases. And then you can actually see the NGINX connector for ModSecurity, the code, on the Spider Labs GitHub page. So it's all freely available, open source. Okay, so so now we know potentially why we would want to use a WAF, how it connects in with NGINX as a third-party module, and talk a little bit about types of rules you'll see and the types of attacks that we're trying to protect against, right? So the user-defined rules, this could be, if you're doing, blacklists, protecting against certain, user agents, IP addresses that you want to define in your WAF rules. It could also be used, as I mentioned earlier, if you find a problem, within one of your applications, you can write a rule to protect against that specific vulnerability while developers can address that problem, right? So give them the time they need to fix the code or upgrade libraries. RFC compliance. So lots of times, a lot of the scripts out there, bots out there, don't necessarily conform to the protocol specifications. So that could be an easy way to make sure that all the requests conform to the RFCs and block some of those scripts or bots. And then you have more common attacks such as SQL injection, cross-site scripting that folks use to attack the website. And if you hear about a lot of data breaches out there, it's these types of attacks that are folks are using to get access to information on the site that they shouldn't have access to. Now getting into the real specifics on each type of attack is a little bit out of scope for the talk today, but OWASP is a great place to get more details about those. And we actually have a few different WAF vendors that have booths and have talks throughout the week here. So feel free to ask us more specific questions about the attacks and how these WAF products protect against those. But we'll provide one example of a cross-site scripting attack. So the malicious user posts the script to the website, and as the user views that infected site, get the page with that code that is telling the user to send information, in this case cookies, to that malicious user. So it's a way to basically hijack that session to have the user send information to that malicious party. And so these are types of attacks that we want to prevent and can protect against with the ModSecurity WAF. So I mentioned OWASP already. So basically, it's an open web application security project. It's a nonprofit charitable organization, which is great. It's not tied to a specific vendor, not beholden to a specific vendor. And they've created this top 10 project, right? So they check with the industry and folks out there and seeing what types of attacks they're seeing. And so it's really the top 10 categories that folks are seeing on actual attacks on live systems. And for 2017, they're actually going to redo that list. And it looks like the survey is closed, but they're actually actively looking for data. So if you're in InfoSec space, feel free to help contribute to the project and take those surveys. And so later this year we'll have updated OWASP top 10, so top 10 categories of attacks. So another project from the OWASP folks is the core rule set. So we mentioned we have the WAF, we can run that module within NGINX or NGINX Plus to protect the sites, but now we need rules to apply. And so OWASP provides a set of rules and from these types of attacks, and there's about I believe there's about 280 rules they have as part of their set. And over the years they keep refining that rule set and adding more rules without adding a ton of bloat, right? So I think they've only added about 50 rules in the past few years, just constantly refining so that it's not a bloat of rules that you have to try to filter out through and understand. Okay, so now before I get into the actual rules and any questions about WAFs in general, ModSecurity, where you'd use it, why you'd use it, before we get into the anatomy of what a rule looks like. Okay, so creating your own rule. So this rule here basically looks at the request URI, and if it begins with shop, we're going to block that. So you have a website and you're seeing web crawlers or other clients looking for a URL that doesn't exist, and you want to block that type of traffic. So with this rule, we're going to be able to block and log that type of request. And we can also chain rules together. So with this next rule that we've chained is looking at the request user ID in the cookie, and that ampersand will count the number of times that variable is called, and if it is equal 0, it means that user ID is not set, and we don't want that user to access the site. We can chain that also with user agent. So an example, we want to block if it's not a specific user agent. In this case, you have a specific client device out there that has a user agent called Inception, and so if that's not what we're seeing, we want to block that traffic. And then we want to make sure that it's also coming through the proper proxies. So if we don't see the X forwarded for, we're going to block them. So we can chain those rules together so they're all acting as one. So if one of those breaks, then we're going to block that traffic. Another option is to use a list, so we're going to blacklist user agents, and so we can pull a list to text file and block specific user agents from accessing the site. So we talked about the OWASP rule set that is available. You can create your own rules like this, and ModSecurity has documentation on all the variables, the parameters you can use to create your own rules. But we have some options as well. So you have TrustWave commercial rule set. That is works really well as a complement to the core rule set. So it does things like virus scanning and more in-depth checks. So with the ModSecurity module for NGINX, you have the ability to run either rule set or both together. For NGINX Plus, you have the supported module. So you can purchase that along with NGINX Plus to have the certified module that we will provide support for, and then you can go to TrustWave to get the actual commercial rule set that they will support and provide technical support or professional services for. There are some SaaS products out there as well. So if it's something that you don't want to manage in-house, but you want to have your applications secured, you can use Cloudflare, StackPath, or other CDNs that provide a WAF service. And then also I want to mention we have partners that are here today, WallArm, Stealth Security, and Signal Sciences. So the certified module means that it's you can get it from our repo, and you can get technical support, make sure that it is functional with NGINX Plus. But you can pretty much load any third-party module with NGINX or NGINX Plus. So Signal Sciences is available as well. And I want to mention that there is the WallArm after party. So at 7 p.m., stop by their booth, get a little card, invite, and so you'll be able to hang out with those folks tonight, ask any technical questions on their product and how their next gen WAF differs from ModSecurity, the others. So what the configuration actually looks like, it's very simple to actually get this stood up. So this is application configuration with NGINX, and so you have normal location, and then you have a location that you want to protect with the WAF, and really it's just two directives to enable that, right? Turning it on and then specifying the rules that you want to use. And you also have the option of specifying an error log, which is a good practice, so that you can separate that out. And then your rules file. Here we have the ModSecurity configuration, the core rule set, and then any other custom rules that you've come up with. And then what that the ModSecurity config looks like. By default, it's just going to log and alert, but not block anything. So if you install it and it's not going to start messing with your application right away, you actually have to specifically turn on the rule engine. Okay, and this is an example of the core rules in the files and the types of attacks. So you can they're split up by type of attack. So if you have a specific application, a PHP app, you would apply that, but not maybe not some others. And so ModSecurity does have its own log format, and it's very verbose, but there are a lot of tools out there that can parse that and consume that, like Splunk, Elk Stack, and others that would parse that for you. And how do you get it? So with NGINX Plus, you have the option of purchasing that as an add-on to get access to the certified module and technical support for that. But it is available on GitHub, so you can build it yourself and run it with open source NGINX or NGINX Plus. And that blog entry gives you details on how to compile a third-party module, whether it's ModSecurity or any other. And so I do have a short demo here. See if that pops up. It did, which is good. So if you're using NGINX Plus, as I mentioned, it is in our repository. It's very easy to pull that down. So it installs that module and lets you know, basically, we just have to load that module in the NGINX configuration. So what that looks like. So right here on line 7, you see just the load module entry. And so that's all we need to do on the actual NGINX config file. And then I've set up a test application called Echo, which you send a request and it just lets you know the request URI that you sent. And then here's the proxy where we actually have turned on ModSecurity, and really just those 3 directives that I mentioned earlier: ModSecurity on, the rules file, and then a separate log file. And then here's that ModSecurity rule file where I'm just including the ModSecurity config, which is pulled down from GitHub. That's actually just their recommended config, so you can just pull that down from the ModSecurity GitHub repository. And then I've just added a very simple test rule. So it looks at arguments, specifically the test param, and if it contains test, we're going to deny, log, and give a status of 403. It's pretty straightforward. And then I have tailing the log file. So if I send this request, we can see I get the 403, and see, and that's because in the request I have test param. This is a test of ModSecurity, and you can see what that looks like in our error log. Access denied with a 403, and it gives you actual detail on why. So not only do we block the traffic, but actually gives you a reason why that traffic is blocked. So just to show you how easy it is to get this up and running, with NGINX, I know when it comes to WAF, one, it is the more intricate things we can do when deploying web applications, and it's also very resource intensive. So when it comes to performance, it's something to keep in mind as well. The more rules you have, the more resource intensive that is. So we see generally about a 3 to 4x hit in performance, right? So if you're doing 1,000 requests per second, it's going to go down to 200 to 300 requests per second, just to give you a baseline on performance. And that's why when it's deployed, it's important to have the scalability as an option, right? As a layer, we can scale out horizontally the NGINX instances that you're using for the load balancing and security. And any questions about the demo? Yeah. Say it again.
You said it scales down by a fraction of the performance.
Yeah.
Is that like for the whole domain, or is it just for the router?
Yeah, that would be for traffic that is for ModSecurity on, right? So if it's going through the WAF, then you would anticipate that drop in performance just because of the overhead in doing that deep packet inspection. Yeah, but if you have a different location that is the ModSecurity is not turned on for, then it would be normal, performance.
When you give the example of the nested rules,
Mm-hmm.
What order are those processed? Are they more specific at the top and get more general, or is it the other way around?
That's a good question. I think that basically it's an and. Yeah. So it's chaining them together, so they would all have to, be true to do that.
For everyone you added, it just got more specific.
Yeah.
Is there a way to manage the rule set isolated across servers?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. So right now, that would be, the way you manage your NGINX configuration. I would say that the NGINX config, along with the ModSecurity rule config, you'd be the kind of managed as code together. For particular applications or deployments. It's an interesting area where, if you guys were in the keynote where we announced the controller product, that could be a good future for that. Yeah. Yep.
Is there any way to take actions other than expeditiously closing the connection? Because that's always, that's not always the best thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
to mechanic, especially if you do it relatively efficiently, and people can keep attacking you, and you spend all your time throwing your
Yeah.
requests to them.
Yeah. So
I know probably most people are familiar with it, but things like
mm-hmm.
where you sit on the request for 5 seconds. That tends to slow people down a lot more because they wait. But that waiting, that doesn't put any strain.
Yeah. So with ModSecurity WAF, it's really just a signature-based, block log monitor. The TrustWave advanced or commercial rule set does provide some more options, and then when you get into some of the next gen WAFs, from WallArm, Signal Sciences, or Stealth Security, they have they use like machine learning and things like that, so that they have a kind of a broader view of the attack vectors. Yeah.
What actions are available? You can close,
Yeah.
you can deny the request. What else is that?
For ModSecurity, yeah, it's pretty much block log alert. Yeah.
I assume you can use the error page directive to do some of this. You get a phone of 3 from ModSecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Error page to implement what you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So you could capture with the error page directive in NGINX, you can capture specific error codes or status codes and handle those differently before sending them to the user. Yeah.
How would you use this in conjunction with rate limiting?
Yeah, so I would definitely use them together. Yeah, so NGINX has rate limiting built in, so that I would definitely recommend to. And you can build that based on a lot of different unique identifiers in the request, and you can cascade those as well. So you could have general rate limit for the application, and then based on a user ID, have a different level of rate limiting. And so, as I mentioned, kind of the first thing is, there's a layered security approach here. So WAF, like I said, it's kind of more like a seatbelt. There's a vulnerability, someone's attacking it, and I want to specifically stop them. But rate limiting, bandwidth shaping, network firewall, ACLs, things like that, all and authentication, authorization to protect the application.
What's the recommended way for tuning false positives on the core rule set?
Yeah, so I know that's one thing with the new rule set. The false positive rate is way down, so it's much better. I wouldn't be able to get into that right now, but that's something that I think the mod security community would be able to help with that, or TrustWave.
You are doing that. It makes sense to drop the rule sets that don't apply to your application.
Definitely, yeah, because that's the overhead, right? The more rules you're running through, then the more overhead that's going to cause. So if you're not running PHP, that the whole PHP set of signatures you wouldn't want to apply. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
If you reduce false positives just down to the new rule set, or is it also the security?
It's both. Yeah. Because there is a new core rule set, for 3.0, but it's basically a rewrite of the engine, so it's a lot more efficient. Yeah.
The introduction of NUnit, I can't imagine that at the executive level, at least, they're not considering adding a proper NGINX sponsored WAF that's directly supported. Can you speak to any internal initiatives on that?
So an internally developed WAF.
Yeah, well, I imagine if the goal is to control everything from the edge through the application controller, the load balancer, all the way down to the application itself, at some point you need security. And I'd be surprised if there wasn't an entrance by NGINX directly in that field.
Yeah, so right now, kind of a a way to help our customers right now. It's that partnership with TrustWave,
Right.
and so you can purchase the support for the module and the functionality with us, and then there's a few different places to get the rule set today, whether it's OWASP or TrustWave.
Sounds like you should buy TrustWave to me, but that's what I'm going to do.
I'll let Gus know. Can you repeat the question?
So, will you have ModSecurity support in your next forward roadmap?
Yeah. So right now we're getting ready to release the beta. This fall. So that I know that's not going to be in the initial release. But I wouldn't be able to speak to the roadmap of that myself. But I think that's a good idea to roll that in, and I'll make an enhancement request for that. All right. Okay, if there's no other questions, thanks for joining. I'll be here for the next few minutes if you want to kind of step up and ask any other questions. Thanks, guys.